Thank you for watching. My name is Glenn Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Today we're going to be talking about what happens to the ballots and the votes of the most vulnerable in our community. Today we're going to be interviewing a former Green Party and Democrat Party activist, and I think you'll be shocked at what she has to say. All right, we're back in Washington State, and I want to make a strong point here. This is not my story. This is the story of somebody who has been an advocate and heavily involved in homeless camp issues and homeless advocacy for a long, long time in Washington State. She was a Green Party activist and a Democrat Party activist. This is her story. She's serious about it. She's a true believer. She's been arrested by the police before for attempting to prevent sweeps of homeless camps. And I think that, like many other people whose heart is often in the right place, sometimes they're put in a situation in which they're taken advantage of and they're used. And this is her story.
If you could explain for our listeners and people who are watching right now, where were you born and how you're so familiar with the homeless environment?
My name is Phoenix Holmes, and I am a peer counselor, chaplain, and advocate for the houseless, including of which Steve Medic and apprentice attorney. I was born in Shelton, Washington. I have been homeless since the day of my birth, all the way until the age of 36. I am 39 now. I have had my first ever residence ever in my life.
So one of the things you were going to do is go help people register to vote. And so explain that process, how you would do that, and what made you be interested in going out and doing that as well.
I was extremely interested due to the fact that I was approached by Anna Schleck, Tyler Gundel, and many other advocates to have a wonderful day at doing this, and it was a raw day. And as we would have a clipboard, and we would have a clicker, and then we would have the registration. The clicker was as when we would go into the encampments, and then we would click off how many people there were. As people were to come up to us, if they wanted to, we would figure out where in their situation of being houseless was. And then number 3, when the registration to vote was, is that if the person was a legal resident, if they were capable to vote because of criminal background issues, and if they were a Washington State resident.
Okay. And you wouldn't ask for ID or anything like that?
No, because unfortunately many of the houseless who are either born or lose their stuff because quite often it's either bulldozing or other situations, it would cause them to not have IDs, birth certificates, or social security cards. So there is no real way to track many of these people.
Sure. And just to clarify for people who are watching this video, you weren't paid to do this, right? This was you were a volunteer doing this.
100% volunteer. I was just, as I said, I was asked because I am an advocate along with many other advocates to join into this because many of the people knew and trusted us.
And when you would interview somebody to try to get them registered to vote, if they didn't know their last name, what's the process you would go about on filling out the voter registration in that situation?
We were told by Anna Schleck herself that if the person did not have their last name or had no knowledge of their last name, and just in a cute inoculate, it would be Glenn X. And we were told to put an X down, and that's it.
Okay. How many people over the span of how long were you registering people to vote, roughly? How much time did you spend on that,
We went, my partner and I went to 3 different encampments, and we got well over 247, because I remember the clicker, just clickers, and then I would say we got probably well in the range of, I would say 150 of those we got registered to vote.
And when you were comparing notes with other people, roughly how many people who were homeless in the Olympia area do you think you guys were able to register to vote overall?
Well, the census that was official for 2018 stated 835, but that is not a true actual number. The true number would be 2,100 and some odd souls.
Okay.
So with that, I would state for that particular day alone, if we were just to go off of the 835 point, I would say we probably got well in the range of 500 to 600 people to register to vote.
Register to
that day.
vote. Okay.
Yes.
And because they wouldn't be able to get mail where they were located, what kind of how would you set up the mailing address for them to be able to get their ballots?
We had two particular places that had given permission for us to use as their address, which was Interfaith Works through Meg Martin, and that was 705 Franklin Street.
Okay.
And or when the warming center was still open, we would use the 225 State Street or State Avenue, excuse me, to use that as the alternate site.
Okay. And so that's where the ballots would come, would be one of those two addresses then?
Yes.
And then would they go up there and be able to pick up their mail or pick up their ballots that way? Is that kind of how they would do it? Or?
That was the way it was supposed to be, yes.
So tell me how it actually happened.
Many of us started within the first couple weeks of the voting season, because we had done this back in May and April of the 2018. We started going there around, I would say, July, August, to try to see if our ballots came through. And unfortunately, as we started noticing, many people were being turned away saying, we don't have any mail for you at all, period. And we're like, wait a minute, there should be a ballot at least coming in for each of these individuals. They're like, no mail has come through. And as it got more and more serious as the time for the primary election started, people were coming up to me left and right of the houseless variety and stating, where's our ballots? We want to be able to vote for the first time. We're so excited. Where's our ballots? And I'm like, I don't know. And I went actually to the front desk of both locations and said, where's the people's mail? Where is it gone? And they're like, we have not received any mail for each of these individuals at all, period. And I'm like, something's wrong here.
Because you would know who they were because you actually registered them to vote. Okay.
And many of them were, some of the ones that I registered myself, and some of them were of the other advocate groups that went out as well. And then Tyler Gundall was even being asked that too. She was like, I don't know. And it was down to the point where we went and started looking up certain people online and started noticing that they had already voted when they never got their ballot yet.
So that's because you can go on the website if you know their basic information. You can actually look to see if your ballot's been counted. That's some on the Secretary of State's website.
Yes.
So you guys actually did that?
Yes, on quite a few of them.
Okay.
And as we started noticing the discrepancy was growing and growing to the point where it just literally deflated the whole houseless family population. From the excitement of being able to be individualized and be given a voice finally, it fizzled out. It made them lose hope and all capability of wanting to do anything.
Because somebody else had voted for them, is what it looks like.
Yes.
So when was the first time that you were doing this big registration drive, and when you first realized that there was something wrong with the ballots?
We had started in April, May of 2018. That was the main census point. It was rather dark during that time. And then we started getting filtered situation and started getting asked around July, August of the 2018.
So the primaries in the 2018 election?
Yes.
Okay. So I understand you brought the attention to Anna Schleck because she's with the city of Olympia, and that's who you gave all your ballots to. And what did she have to say?
She said, I did not know that this was happening. I'll look into it. And I said, well, you have exactly now 2 hours of the city council because it was Tuesday night. And so she went and took a look, and she's like, the ballot should be there. And I'm like, no, here's a whole bunch of people behind me telling me, no, we have not gotten our ballots or anything. And she's like, I'll look into it, and started flobbing me off. In fact, she actually ran into the back and would not come out the rest of the evening. And we asked of her, the one of the people, to go and find her, and lo and behold, she had left completely. And then no more than 3 days later, I end up having a guy with a knife, a shank knife, come up behind me and state, "You stop asking for votes and all the ballots, because if you do, then you're going to find this at the end of your life."
So who is Anna Schlecht? Phoenix brings her up multiple times in this interview. Anna Schlecht is the Community Services Program Manager for the City of Olympia. She has a master's in public administration from Evergreen State College, and she's a former business manager for the Capital City Pride organization, among other titles. And for many years, she has been politically connected to powerful special interests in Olympia, particularly in the homeless industrial complex and various grant grifting schemes around town. Another person who should be coming up more often is, when it comes to this subject, is the Thurston County Auditor, who is responsible for local elections, Mary Hall. And the actions described by Phoenix have occurred under Hall's administration, but nothing has ever been done to protect the most vulnerable or even to ensure that they're the ones who are actually voting their ballots.
So do you think this is a pattern of behavior with a lot of the different homeless advocacy groups all around the state? Is this something that you've heard or seen around the state?
Yes, very much so. We actually heard reports from Bremerton, Everett, Fife, heavily Mount Vernon and Marysville. I would say that we need to maybe even reduce the number of ballots and to go back to the original machine system where you had to go in and actually vote at a machine.
So with as many ballots as you'd registered for a lot of the homeless in the community, right, from the camps and stuff, and they were going to at least 2 of these addresses, who really has access potentially to those ballots?
From all appearances, it was the staff of each location that had the keys. The 225 address had a metal enclosure where they had their filing system, and only staff was allowed through there. As for the 705, their mailing system was a little crummy. The filing system was literally sitting out in the open, but they had keys to them as well. But quite often the keys were left out in the open too and unattended. So it was not as a great system with Franklin.
Okay. Would you say that Anna Schlecht might have access to them, or somebody from her office potentially could have access to the ballots in these cases?
Very much so. Anna Schlecht was the one that we reported directly back to as we came back from the encampments and the streets. And we went into this small room that was at the warming center, the 225 location, and we would hand her, just like this, the main stack of stuff, and she would put it into a little milk crate and set it off to the side. And then as the time progressed, the milk crate got bigger and bigger, the stack of them. And then at the end of the 3 days, she took all of the stacks and transversed them over to the Olympia City Hall.
Okay.
And then that's where we were told to wait for the accurate count of the census and the notarization of it, including of which how many actually ballots or registrations for voting was also done. And that's why we had a sort of a number of registrations of, I would say 700 some odd registrations actually were done.
Okay.
And again, I would say we may have gotten only maybe 100.
Where you actually received the ballots and found people who got them. Okay, got it.
So, and it was sporadic, really badly sporadic.
I see. Now, you were willing to go public with this, knowing that there's a lot that you've had threats or risks, associated with it. So I want to thank you for doing that, because I think that's a really hard situation to be in. And I know our viewers will appreciate this, because I think a lot of people don't know what's happening here. So thank you so much, Phoenix, for being willing to come forward and tell the truth about this.
This is Phoenix Holmes' story. Most people watching this video have probably not lived a life with the challenging life experiences that she has endured. And it might be hard for many to relate to her, but her story opens a window into how the most vulnerable populations in our communities can be manipulated and used to benefit the politically powerful and connected. Not just for grant grifting cash schemes, which I've discussed before, but also they proliferate in every urban center in Washington and involves ballots and their voting. Because these votes can be harvested. If you have an all-mail-in ballot system, the people whose name and existence in a tough life situation is used to justify grants on the ballots, they get tossed aside when they're no longer needed. The cash is intercepted by the grant grifters, and the ballots apparently intercepted by those who want to remain in political power. Meanwhile, the people whose existence was used to justify these grants and the ballots, they don't get any help or meaningful assistance. They certainly are not allowed to actually vote. According to Phoenix, many of these camp residents were not happy with the city of Olympia incumbents, and they were planning to vote against them. But of course, conveniently, it appears that they didn't get those ballots in the first place, and they never could do that. According to her, this is happening all over Washington state, in other cities where camps and homeless populations have exploded in recent years. With all mail-in ballots, no effective effort at any type of chain of custody for these ballots, and no certainty that a real person even receives the ballots, this type of abuse and fraud will only grow bigger in the future. And this isn't compassionate or honest, but it is what the Washington state voter system currently allows. It isn't just Olympia or Thurston County. In King County recently, some activists from Federal Way showed me a bunch of ballots that they had found when they went into the camp after the primary was done here in 2021. So I think that it's important to know these people never got their ballots either. What happened? I mean, there's a huge pile of them here. And they were all addressed as the Union Gospel Mission in Kent, and yet somehow they ended up at a homeless camp in Federal Way. And since most of them still have their ballots in it, at least in this case, these weren't voted apparently. But who knows what's happening with these ballots? Once they're sent out to these organizations, there's no clear chain of custody. There's no clarity that the ballot even gets to the person who supposedly was registered to vote. And this is one of the problems that we have with this kind of a system. And this is the kind of thing that I think Phoenix Holmes and her story helps illustrate. And it's important for us to realize that if we don't start paying attention to how the system works, how the most vulnerable are actually treated, making sure the people who supposedly are supposed to watch this and actually pay attention to it, that they fix and address these problems, we're not going to have honest representation in the elections when it comes to people like this. So, if you like today's video, please feel free to share it with others. Please feel free to share it with your local auditor. I'd like to hear what they have to say, and I bet you would too. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can also go on our website at wethegovern.com if you want to learn more. But remember, the only way to change this or anything else that we find going wrong or that we don't like or disagree with in our community is to get involved. The future belongs to those who show up.